Welcome to episode 5. I hope you guys are doing great. It's Friday, February 5th, 2021. So let's dive into some housekeeping. The first thing I want to talk about is field. So I have had some questions about field, and some people are concerned about not being able to meet the minimum hours. That is non-negotiable. 40 hours is mandatory. I need you guys to make sure that you plan out your days so that you can spend as much time as possible in the classroom. So, looking at it today, we have 3 weeks left in February, 4 weeks in March, kind of a blender week between March and April, and then 3 more weeks in April, giving you a total of 11 weeks, including finals week, to get your 40 hours in. That's over 50 school days, which means that you guys may have to go once or twice a week, spend a couple hours here just to get your hours in. If you have to go for 2 hours on a Friday that wasn't scheduled, that you're not planning on testing, that's okay, but get your hours in. Now let's talk about the lessons. You guys are required to write 7 lessons for the grade level that you're in. Before you start writing these lessons, I would talk to your teacher and see what they're comfortable with you teaching in their classroom. Somebody has told me that there was a teacher that was concerned about state testing and maybe only letting them teach 1 lesson. So my response to that is take your time, get to know your teacher. Maybe as they get to know you and see that you're a good guest and a respectful guest and willing to work and help them, they will be more willing to let you teach some lessons. Then once you kind of get a feel for where they are, go ahead and ask what they would like for you to plan, even if you're not going to use it. Just tell them that you need practice and you want it to be in alignment with what they're working on so that maybe they can look at your lesson plans and kind of pick their brain a little bit. I think it's important when you're in these situations that you collaborate with veteran teachers. Even if they're not using all of the new best practices that we're using, they do have just a treasure trove of experience that you guys need to try to pick up on as much as you can. All right, next, let's talk about mini lessons. There were some issues with the first round as far as students not meeting the minimum time limit. That is concerning. Remember that you have to have 10 minutes of original content, meaning that if you have a 10-minute 1-second video and 4 minutes of that is a YouTube video that you've integrated into your own lesson, that doesn't count as your 10 minutes. I need you guys to teach for 10 minutes. That's not a lot to ask, to teach 10 minutes every 2 weeks. Okay, next up, show, don't tell. I can read your lesson plans. I don't need you guys to go through and read them to me. I want you to show me what your classroom will look like, what you look like in front of the classroom. The example I posted from Megan this week was really good about differentiating in the classroom for different learning styles, different ability levels, and acting like you're the teacher. I know that maybe some of you are having trouble with the environment, and the environment may hold you back a little bit, but if you pretend that you're in the front of the classroom and act like you're having interactions with kids, that will prepare you for actually being in the classroom. And it helps me kind of critique your teaching style and little things that may make your classroom a little more efficient and help your classroom management. A lot of you guys saw comments where I was asking you to have your things written down so that you didn't have to have your back to the camera. When you have your back to the camera, that means that your back would be to your students. And when you're not watching your students, that's when bad things happen. I'm not saying like terrible things, but disruptions and horseplay and basically not being focused and engaged on a lesson. Those are things that are going to get dinged by your administrator in the future when you're doing your teacher evaluations. That, and make sure that you have a technology piece in every lesson. So with that, I want to dive into this week's questions. All right, let's dive into this week's questions of the week. First, from Caitlin, what do you think is the best way to organize seating in the classroom, or does it depend on class? Well, this is different now because we're dealing with COVID. So right now, every kid has to be a certain distance apart, depending on if you have partitions between them and if they're wearing masks. You'll have to basically do what your school asks you to do. Now, in non-COVID times, I always assign seats. I think that it's really important that you put kids around other students where they will be successful. And then maybe you can work towards putting them with their friends as a reward. But it's very important that you eliminate as many distractions as possible. Most of the kids in intervention classes are already having some sort of content gap, and being distracted and horsing around with your friends is really only going to make that gap bigger. So another thing that I used to do when I would have blended classes is I would put kids with really good work habits around kids with not so good work habits, because then hopefully those would rub off on my kids that were struggling with how to manage their time. Next question, Megan, what are some ways that you suggest for making a healthy learning environment? Also, what are some ways that you create an environment where students can trust you? So, healthy learning environment. Obviously, right now, physical health is a priority, but for me, emotional health is very important. I have been doing a lot of work with resiliency and with kids that have traumatic backgrounds and that have different, when you look at traumatic experiences, they have quite a few. So what happens then is I have to make sure that they're in a place where they're only getting positive communication, which means I have to eliminate some words from my vocabulary in my classroom. Words like can't, I don't say very often. Ignorant, stupid, dumb, those words are never mentioned in my classroom. Usually when a kid makes a mistake in a classroom like that, I look at it from a standpoint as to, why would you do that? You did this. Please explain to me why you did. That's not what I wanted you to do. That's not what's appropriate in a classroom. This is what you should have done. A lot of times what we deal with in behavioral issues is stopping the problem behavior, but we leave kids hanging a lot because we don't tell them what we expect of them. So you have a kid that knows they're not supposed to be out of their seat running around, but what are they supposed to do when they feel super energetic or antsy? Did we give them something to do then? Did we give them an alternative? So it's really easy to make mistakes and do the wrong thing when you don't know what the right thing is. I think that handling discipline that way goes to creating a trusting environment, also not raising your voice, staying calm, especially with highly combative kids, letting them know through your experiences that you are going to be their calm person. You're going to be their rock. You're not going to sell them out. You're not going to rip their head off. I think that's also very important in building that trust. What are some good ways where students are given opportunities to make sense of their own ideas, information, and skills through involvement in complex learning situations? The most complex thing that you can do is to teach someone else. So I would do different things, like I would encourage my students to come up and show me how to do it. Maybe not show the whole class. Maybe they were really nervous and didn't want to be in front of the whole class. But being able to walk me through it and show me what to do, teach me how to do something, that shows a very deep understanding. Conversations, debates, those are a great way of helping kids make sense of their own ideas. I also think that Multimedia projects are a great way for students to make sense of their own ideas and be original and be engaged in a project, giving them a prompt and letting them go. I used to do, when I taught special ed science, I used to do a glider project, and it had 2 parameters: had to fly and the egg didn't break. And I didn't care what they made it out of. And we had great big competitions and rewards and prizes and a pizza party for participation at the end. But it allowed kids to take all the stuff that we learned in physical science to try to win this competition. And they only had 2 parameters they had to follow. So it allows them to be creative and to synthesize things and create different original ideas that shows that they're in that different level of blooms. What are some of your favorite websites and technology to use in the classroom, and why? So for math, I really like MobyMax and I like IXL. IXL and iReady for little kids, and MobyMax for high school learners. MobyMax is more focused on a personal pace and content standards, and it breaks down each content standard and what kids are missing, and it identifies the gaps, and it creates its own curriculum. So my kids would use that and earn game time through MobyMax. Then you have your iReady and IXL stuff for the younger kids. It's way more cartoonish. It's really great. They have some nonsense words in there that little kids really love, and they start to pick up on things, and it's just a really wonderful experience for kids, especially in my multi-handicaps unit, to be exposed to math without being drilled and killed. I also think that for higher level high school kids that are in your Algebra 2s and your advanced maths and your calculus, Khan Academy is great. I think that the way he breaks things down is really beneficial. It's very methodical. He has a great tone, and he has a lot of additional resources on his website to use. I have used other things in the past. Maybe in the next week or so, I'll come up with a little guide of just different resources. There are some podcasts that I think that you guys should listen to as well. And that's our final question for the week. Thank you guys so much for participating. I think that you guys are doing a great job. So please keep it up on the discussion boards. So I want to wrap up with this. I'm not going to be too lengthy today because I have included a podcast that I want you guys to listen to over the weekend or into next week as part of the content for this course. It's a podcast on teaching during COVID. I think it's pretty relevant, especially with all of our schools nationwide that are struggling to reopen, and with you guys going into classrooms for field. So give it a listen. Stay safe. God bless.